أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم Alhamdulillah, I praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for giving me this honor to present my paper this afternoon. But before I do that, I wish to express my gratitude to the organizers for holding this conference and for inviting me to make my small contribution with the title Towards a Peaceful Future of ASEAN, that is to say Southeast Asian nations in this era of turbulence and the need to construct a wasatiyah-driven Islamic civilization across the region. Alhamdulillah, just now we heard from Sheikh Omar Obaid a very good exposition on the universal values of Islam. And that was a very good I would say presentation, and my presentation is, you might say, a footnote to his presentation, because I want to focus on Southeast Asia, but His Excellency was talking about the beautiful Islamic ethical and civilizational values on a broad scale, on a global scale, and I would like to talk about the need to establish this kind of hadara, this hadara insaniya or hadara wasatiyya in Southeast Asia. So my talk is, you might say, just a small footnote to the presentation by Sheikh Omar Obaid. I do not have much time, and I would like to just to find out from the organizers what time should I finish? You tell me, please. This is part of Hadara Islamiyya, is observing time. 15 minutes. Alhamdulillah. Thank you. It's okay. So 15 minutes, that's good. Because I present this paper, you may have a copy of the paper. I have written the paper with about 18 pages. I will try to give you the main points in 15 minutes, inshallah. And please, if I exceed the time, you please tell me, all right, to stop in time, so that I will not take the time of other people. So my concern is, how do we establish this civilization on the basis of the concept, or you might say the manhaj of al-wasatiyya? Because what was talked by Sheikh Obaid are the elements of wasatiyya. Justice, good behavior towards other people, and respect for others, giving the choice, the freedom to choose without forcing them, and living in peace and harmony. All this comes under the concept of wasatiyya. So I mentioned that we have the problem today of the age of turbulence, and this turbulence is also affecting Southeast Asia, and we believe that if the Muslims in Southeast Asia, in Indonesia, Malaysia, Brunei, these Muslim majority countries, can develop wasatiyah, hadara wasatiyah, inshallah, the region, ASEAN, will become a more peaceful region. I also mentioned that the non-Muslim population of Southeast Asia will have a more positive attitude towards the Muslims if the Muslims can observe these 6 conditions I mentioned in the paper. That is, the ability of the Muslims to strike a balance between the needs of spirituality and the needs of materiality, between tradition and modernization. And number 2, the ability of the Muslims to commit for peaceful coexistence, cooperation in multi-religious and multi-ethnic nation states. Number 3, if the Muslim leaders are committed to uphold the rule of law, enlarge social and economic justice, and promote interreligious and intercultural respect of human dignity, cultural and religious diversities. And number 4, the emergence of a new generation of leaders who are characterized by moral excellence, by holistic knowledge, and giving priorities to the social welfare and economic well-being of the masses. And number 5, if we can spread this spirit of compassion among Muslims for the plight of fellow human beings, irrespective of religious or cultural differences. And number 6, concern about the environment. If the Muslim communities can develop strategies and mechanisms to come up with more and more green technologies so that the environment can be protected from the devastation of heartless industrialization and capitalistic enterprises. And then I mentioned about Islamophobia in the West and also Islamophobia in our region as a result of Western media, and we need to also make the non-Muslim population understand that this Islamophobia is part of a Western agenda against the Muslims, and to also paint the Muslim world in a very bad light. I talk about this wasatiyah-oriented civilization, which is characterized by justice, moral excellence, and balance between the extremes of laxity and liberality on the one hand, and the extremes of rigidity and radicalism on the other, across Southeast Asia. And this requires long-term planning. And I mentioned here that it is not an easy task because we have not really established the priority of teaching this wasatiyah-oriented Islamic knowledge. But, okay, I will move on to the specter of turbulence, turmoil, and disorder affecting Southeast Asian region. I talk about 6 mega trends in Southeast Asia. We have to be careful about these 6 mega trends. The first is the rise of Asia Pacific, which is okay, because the second is the widening impact of the process of democratization and secularization of political systems in East Asia, in Asia Pacific and Southeast Asia. And the third is the emergence of religious fundamentalism, extremism, and militancy among Muslims, Christian, and Buddhist communities in ASEAN communities. We have seen what happened, what has been going on in Myanmar, which is to me a manifestation of Buddhist extremism. We have also seen manifestations of Christian fundamentalism and also extremism in the Philippines. And the fourth mega trend is the globalization of alternative social media, which is affecting the young people. And how do we educate the young so that they will not be influenced by the negative values which are available in the social media. And the fifth mega trend is the internationalization of Western paranoia of Muslim identity, militancy, radicalism, and extremism after 9/11. And the sixth mega trend is what we would see as something positive, that is the creation of the ASEAN community, inshallah, by the end of this year. By December 31st, I believe the ASEAN community will be formally established. And so we need to work within that context of what is going to be called the ASEAN community. And I believe that it's possible for Muslims in Southeast Asia, particularly Malaysia, Indonesia, Brunei, to push forward the agenda for establishing this wasatiyah civilization and make it also something that is appreciated by Thailand, by Myanmar, by the Philippines, by Vietnam, and hopefully also by Myanmar. And I also talk about some challenges in Southeast Asia. The eminent Sheikh did not mention these challenges in Southeast Asia. He was talking about general principles of Islamic civilizational and ethical values, which are very good. But I think we need to focus on some of the challenges in Southeast Asia, in Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, Philippines, and so on. Number one, the greater assertiveness of the spread of Shia teachings into the Sunni communities in Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, and the Philippines. Number two, the emergence and spread of liberal Islam network in Indonesia since the last decade. And number three, the persistence of the Qadianiyah, Ahmadiyya movement in Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore, claiming themselves to be the true Muslims. And in the case of Indonesia, they are being supported by some Muslim organizations in the name of human rights and also democracy, or the rights of minorities. And number four, the political disunity and divisions among the majority Muslim population in Malaysia and Indonesia. And number five, the public confusion with regard to the newly coined slogan of moderate Islam. The West came up with this label, moderate Islam. And so some people claim to be moderate, some people claim to be not moderate, but the definition is made by the superpowers, and we should not comply with that definition. We have our own definition of wasatiyah. And then also the discord, the inter-religious discord in Malaysia between the perspective of Muslim orthodoxy in upholding theological puritanism and the perspective of Christian contextualization of the gospel in the Malay world. And finally, the next one, the internal political tension between the proponents. This is more in Indonesia, because Indonesia is the largest Muslim country in the world. It has 270 million people, and about 80% are Muslims. But you have the problem of pluralistic Panchasila ideology on the one hand, and also the spread of Islamic way of life as a holistic system of life. And finally, of course, not to forget, we do have long-standing religio-political tension between Muslim minorities in southern Thailand, southern Philippines, and Myanmar, and also the central governments of those countries. So these are some of the challenges, and how many more minutes I have? Timekeeper, how many more minutes? How many? 5 more minutes. Okay, thank you. I also mentioned about ISIL and the challenge of ISIL. Okay, then I talk about the agenda for promoting al-wasatiyya as the explicit theme of civilizational reconstruction. The Sheikh Omar was talking about this al-bina al-hadari, al-jadid, in general. I'm just focusing it on wasatiyya as the theme of that new civilizational reconstruction. Then I give also the meaning of Ummah Wasat according to the Quran, and also according to Abul Ala Maududi and also Muhammad Asad, and the implications of Wasatiyya. And finally, the content of the course of Islamic civilizations in the universities. So maybe in the next 4 minutes, I'd like to share with you this part, because we do have courses on Islamic civilization being taught in Indonesia, Malaysia, Brunei, maybe also here in this college, and many other countries. I believe that we need to revisit the curriculum for Islamic civilization to incorporate the elements of wasatiyya, and also to address the issues which are being faced by Muslims in this era of uncertainty. So I'll read this part. We hope that in the process of reviewing, revising, or improving the course on Islamic civilization in universities in ASEAN region, the theme of al-wasatiyya is given greater prominence, and the goal of actualizing the Ummah Wasat civilization as a regional transnational objective in the 21st century is also discussed. So I hope that different countries, Brunei, Malaysia, Indonesia, hopefully also Muslim organizations here and also in the Philippines, will revise the curriculum on Islamic civilization. At the level of the primary and secondary schools, the idea of the Muslim community being obligated to become the Khairu Ummah and Ummah Wasat will have to be given greater emphasis. In other words, this, we have to look into the curriculum of Islamic civilization. Do we give enough attention to the idea of Ummah as above, let's say, Qawm or Dawla? I would like the curriculum to emphasize not so much on Dawla Islamiyya, but Hadara Islamiyya, Hadara Insaniya, as the Fadilatul Sheikh Omar Ubaid was talking throughout his presentation for more than an hour. He never talked about Dawla Islamiyya, he talked about Hadara, Hadara, and Hadara. So I think we need to emphasize this aspect of Hadara, because that will cut across nations, it will cut across communalities, it will cut across the divisions among us, and the non-Muslim population in Southeast Asia will feel that they're also part of this new endeavor to create a new civilization based on al-wasatiyah, or the justly balanced position of Islam. I have just one more minute, I think. All these efforts would remain theoretical or rhetorical if there is no real efforts in the Muslim communities to realize the cultural paradigm shift from the culture of mediocrity, because wasatiyah does not mean mediocrity. Wasatiyah means al-khayriyah, al-adala, al-tawazun, al-i'tidal, بين الإفراط والتفريط, and this wasatiyah also means excellence and التفوق and so on, and not mediocrity, petty-mindedness, religio-political divisiveness, slavish imitation of Western civilizational norms and standards, the culture of corruption. I think we have to admit this. Al-fasad is a great evil in this part of the world, and Muslims are also have a big share in this culture of fasad or corruption, and wasatiyah, inshallah, will overcome that problem, and also disregard for environmental sustainability. We hope that, inshallah, the Muslims in Southeast Asia will, together with the non-Muslim population, can work together to save the environment, because the environment is being ravaged, and down another 50 years down the line, we may not have enough clean water, enough energy for everybody, not just Muslims, to survive in this new era of turbulence. And finally, I would like to urge that Muslim ministers of education and also ministers of religious affairs, particularly Indonesia, Malaysia, Brunei, and also Thailand and Singapore, Philippines, can sit together in the ASEAN Forum to urge the educational institutions to revise the curriculum on Islamic civilization in light of the concept of wasatiyah, and also in light of the new realities, the challenges which I have mentioned earlier. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.